Hello. So last time I talked about classes as as abstract as aspects are, and avoiding this tendency that I have to look at classes as this rigid thing, even when I have liberated aspects to an extent. Um, Now, I think that something that I was missing in the last part that I would like to bring up is gender. Now, I think that viewing classes like gender is probably not the hottest take, but I've never seen it. Um, because gender didn't really pop off as a thing that people think about until a good bit after Classpecting kind of died down. So I think it is worth looking at it through this lens that has not really been taken into consideration. Now, I don't think that classes are exactly comparable to gender because that would be stupid, but I do think that there is a lot of similarity there that has not been talked about much. Because classes and gender are both kind of how you go about and present a sort of hard to define thing that exists in everyone's lives and is kind of made up. Um, and of course, very real, because that's a very common thread in this series so far, is that things are very fake, very real at the same time, because that's how life is. Not the aspect, but I mean, the aspect itself is also like that, but you know what I mean. Now, I, for transparency, am gender fluid. I, at this point, don't really think of it in those terms as much anymore. Um, but a year ago, I sort of unlocked this realization that I have boy in me, which was fun. Um, and alongside that, I discovered that I am quite a fan of boys sometimes, and that is also very fun. But that is not the whole picture. I am very much so uh, all over the place. It's just that at the moment, I bird. It's just that at the moment, I am less these defined things, and I swap between them and more just a coagulation of them. I need this fucking bird. You know what? No. No, you know what? Birds and Classpecting, they're good friends. You get to have this lovely bird in the background, and you're gonna love it because it's lovely. So, my gender is very much so kind of a joke. Um, I have a whole clown thing going on, as you can see from this the image that I've got for this thing, and that is everywhere. Thank you again to, I don't know how to pronounce it, King Cubus, Kin Cubus, something like that. It's in the description. Um, and of course, if you're reading the transcription of this, then cope. I'm sorry. Um, but so my gender is sort of a bit of a facade, um, and very complicated. I am still figuring it out to some extent, but it's mostly settled at this point to this kind of this more sometimes shifts around a bit. I have times when I'm feeling more boy, which has been the past little bit. And there will be times in when I'm recording this when I'll sound a little closer like this, and I'm kind of getting more like femme vibes. And I'll just be this. I don't know if this is what I sound like. I just kind of change a lot. My voice changes a lot. My class does not change a lot anymore. I have been settled on Seer for a long time. But not even that long. 3 or 4 years. Shortly before I made my guide. And I went through 6 or 7 different class specs that I had throughout all the years. Initially, based entirely just on I thought they sounded cool. My first claim was Knight of Doom, which is comically false. But you know, I mean, I'm sure that is in me somewhere to some extent, because that's how things are. Classes, much like aspects, are kind of a whole thing. They're one. And though I am a seer, and I have my tendencies, I have done things that a witch would do. I have done things that a thief would do. I have done things that a page would do. And that's normal. That's just normal. And with gender, right? This is dying down to an extent, but it's still definitely in the minds of a lot of people. This idea that there are things that women do and things that men do. And unfortunately, a lot of those people have this idea that there are things that non-binary people do. Because in a lot of circles, it's sort of seen as now there's 3 genders. There's man, woman, and non-binary as a whole, which doesn't really work. But there are these ideas. If you are trans, then you are, from a societal standpoint, expected to have blue hair and pronouns. And that's simply not always the case. The pronouns are, but, you know, the idea behind it, of what people really mean by pronouns in that context, it's not always the case. And I'm quite fond of taking an anarchistic view of gender, and especially to pronouns. I am very fond of when I'm in certain femme moods, I like to still use he, him. That feels very fun and good. But I don't want that always. Sometimes I wanna be something else, and that's fine. And with classes, there's not pronouns. Pronouns don't exist. I guess you could say that the aspects are pronouns, but it doesn't need to be a one-to-one. But classes have these roles, these ideas that are expected of them, and you can fit into those, but I also think that it's quite possible to not fit into them. I think that it is very possible for a seer who doesn't speak for hours on end about bullshit. I think it's very possible to have a thief that doesn't exactly steal. I think it is very possible to have a page that is, I don't know, figured shit out pretty quickly. I mean, pages, that's a whole other fucking thing. I might have like a single page episode at some point. Um, but I think that the idea of like, here is how someone with this class will progress through life, I don't think that works. Um, and even the things which cause them to be how they are aren't guarantees. I've got fairly vague guidelines for how it probably worked out, where witches are often, in my experience, constructed out of a desire to push back against limiters in their life. This idea that they are forced into acting with their aspect in some way that doesn't appeal to them. But that doesn't have to be the case. Someone could simply be curious in a way that lends themselves to doing the witchy thing. And I think I've caused some confusion with this. I initially, long ago, at this point, had, shortly after my guide dropped, I decided to make a deep dive into every class, and I had manifestations of how it would look with these aspects, and that was dreadful. Some parts of it were good, and I greatly appreciate the people who worked on that with me, because they really had some of the best parts in it. And I don't think I necessarily needed to delete them, but I just felt at the time that the damage that was being done was just, it wasn't worth keeping around. And I still sort of agree with that. I think that having this, like, thing, even when later I added a disclaimer saying, oh, well, these are just possible manifestations, these are just examples. I don't think it did anyone any good, because if someone relates to an example in a class or aspect that doesn't actually work for them, then I have done a disservice if they then go, oh, well, that example fits me best, so I must be this. Because it doesn't work that way. Things are complicated. Things are very complicated. And where a person comes from matters a lot, but it doesn't determine everything. I'm not huge on the idea of, I guess I lean more towards the nurture side than nature in terms of what determines how a person is, but there are inherent things about people that they inherit from birth. That is objective. Certain conditions are more likely, certain just, and things about people, your brain is wired in certain ways when you are being formed, and then you get rewired through life experiences, but there is a baseline, and everyone's baseline is different. So acting like they aren't, like people can just match completely, and they need these life experiences to reach these ways of being. It doesn't work. It is not realistic. And I don't want to support that idea anymore, that's how it works, because it isn't how it works. And I'm going on a bit of a tangent. So, a maid may not have the exact linings that I defined in my guide, um, and that's okay. That is very okay. They don't need to. No one needs to be anything specific to be a certain class spect. As I've said before, it's very much so defined by your own perception, and I don't want to limit people. I have limited myself. For a long time, I adhered very strictly to what a seer of light was in my mind, and I had to have that perception changed to a certain degree before I could realize that I didn't need to base myself entirely on that perception in the first place. I had to break free just enough that I could realize that there was no reason for me to be stuck to this idea anyways. I can be a seer of light and not match the idea I have in my mind of the perfect seer of light. Because ultimately, I am not a seer of light, I am a person. And honestly, that might be all I have to say with this. And the birds are getting louder. The birds are coming for me. Oh god. I hear them now. I mean, I don't, but I did a moment ago. I believe that the birds are coming to get me, and... Oh god. Oh god. Oh no, it's fine. I suppose I'll see you next time. On the next episode of this thing. There's no birds coming to kill me. I'm fine. Yeah. Take care of yourself. Psych. Haha, got you. I totally planned this. So, part of the gender discussion that I wanted to have, the birds did come for me, by the way. I have died. I'm recording this a little later, like 5 minutes, and the birds have killed me. But I remembered something else that I wanted to add, which I should have remembered, but I did not. Gender serves an interesting factor in Classpecting, because for a long time, and in many corners still now, the classes were seen as restricted by gender because that was suggested in canon. And for a very long time, those restrictions were seen primarily as a prince and maid are guy and girl respectively. Knight, I think? No, that's not true. I don't remember. I don't remember because it was kind of stupid. I personally think that it's kind of stupid, but I also don't want to... Oh my god, the birds. I think a bird actually just bumped into my window. That was weird. I'll remove that. But I think that it's kind of stupid, but I don't want to make fun of people who are into that. Because all of this is kind of stupid, you know? But I think it's interesting seeing this gendered thing applied to classes, because the connection's been there. I didn't really have much more to say. I just wanted to point out that there was precedent for my perspective. That there's already this idea connecting gender and in the classes. Okay, so I said I take care or something, but I hope you have a terrible day. Um,